The funeral at Westminster Abbey complete. Now the gun carriage, led by 138 Royal Navy sailors, will now make its way to Buckingham Palace and then through to Wellington Arch, where it will be transferred to a hearse. But let's take a moment and talk about what we saw in this beautiful, moving, stunning tribute, religious service in every way to Queen Elizabeth II, which ended with bagpipes, lone piper in the balcony of Westminster Abbey, playing Sleep, Dearie, Sleep, a Scottish pipe song. And it was just an absolutely beautiful service in so many ways. And I want to get thoughts from Piers and Ainsley. Piers, you want to start us off?
Well, I thought the piper was just the most poignant of so many poignant moments. Every morning at Balmoral at 9 a.m., he would wake everybody up under the Queen's window by piping it. And then he piped this famous lament, the Scottish lament, Sleep, Dearie, Sleep. And it's a famous lament in Scotland, but I thought that was incredibly poignant, as was the 2-minute silence, as was, I thought, the whole tone of the service, which was so beautifully done, everything chosen, I believe, by the Queen. So this is how she wanted her funeral to be. And like everything the Queen ever did, it just showed immaculate taste, unbelievable class and dignity. And I found it, just watching it, you know, almost unbearably sad, but also a great example of British pomp and pageantry at its absolute finest. I mean, this whole day so far has been spine-tingling. And I think now we're hearing behind us the guns going off now every minute. Big Ben is ringing out continuously now. You have this extraordinary procession of all these different parts of the Queen's life, our great commander-in-chief as well as monarch, and they're going to come past here, right where we are in a few minutes. And it's just an extraordinary spectacle and completely fitting with the magnitude of this woman's life and her reign.
There was a quote from a reporter after her coronation that I just wanted to read. And remember, the coronation was right after World War II. And he wrote, "The trumpets and ancientness were proof of our survival. The king's young daughter would rule the peace, our decency, tradition, duty in contradiction to the ghastliness of Nazism." Written right after her coronation. And here we see her family, her daughter, Princess Anne, and her sons, now King Charles and Andrew and Edward, and her grandsons walking right behind her, Ainsley, as we watch all of this play out.
You know, I think what stands out for me is her deep faith, and to see a church service honoring her life and her legacy, how important the church was to her, how important her faith, not only with God, but with Jesus Christ was, how bold she was. She talked about it when she felt it was necessary. She said after her father's death, it was a beautiful, if you really think about her words, and like you said earlier, Piers, her words are poetry.
Yeah.
She said after her father's death, "We are all just visitors, this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home." I was watching an interview with the Archbishop of Canterbury this morning, I believe on the BBC or Sky News, and he said that she is at peace. She is finally in heaven with her mother and her sister and her father and her loved ones. Piers, did you want to say something?
These are the Canadian Mounties here, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and that was the Queen's personal choice that they should lead this final procession.
Yes.
A great tribute to Canada, obviously one of the Commonwealth countries. But they're legendary police, of course, around the world, the Mounties. So a wonderful honour for them, obviously.
The Queen had a 53-year love affair with the Mounties. They wear the red tunics and the Stetsons, and of course she loved her horses, she loved her dogs. She had 30 corgis or dorgies, which is a Dachshund combined with a corgi, over the course of her monarch. And Andrew gave her 2. And those were the 2 that were remaining when she died on September 8th. So he will take care of those, he and along with Fergie.
And you know, I've been getting a lot of texts from people, tweets from people following all this, but there were some that really made me stop and think. This one here, from a woman called Lisa Moyer. "My son is part of the gun carriage crew. He's directly behind the coffin, second in on our right. We are unbelievably proud parents." Imagine all the families of all the people taking part here, the young men who are carrying the coffin earlier. What an honor, what a privilege, and what a stress, right, to get it right and to do your country and Queen proud. But that young man will be one of the 142, I think it is, Royal Naval rating. So they're the junior ranking members of the Royal Navy, but they'll all be hugely proud. They'll all have large families watching this. Imagine if that was your son or daughter in this parade.
I was thinking about that with the children singing in the Westminster Choir, these young boys with beautiful voices. They sang a beautiful song, Like as the Heart, based on the psalm. A hart is an adult deer, the red deer that's seen in the Northern Highlands of Scotland. So a lot of references to Scotland here for the Queen. That music for that they sang was written specifically for the Queen, for the funeral today. So just so many woven pieces of her life that came into this. And of course, you couldn't help but watch all the members of the family as they took this in. And certainly beautiful to see young George and Charlotte looking at all of this. I couldn't help but think that someday when George is coronated, probably George VII, I would imagine, we'll re-roll this video of him as a young boy attending Queen Elizabeth II's funeral, a dynasty that has gone back 1,000 years since William the Conqueror, and just steeped in history, every one of these rituals that we've watched played out.
There was a card on top of the Queen's coffin, which we now know was from King Charles III to his late mother. And he wrote simply, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R," which was very powerfully poignant. One tribute from a monarch to his mother, the previous monarch. And there's the succession right there. And I thought the other part of the service which caught my eye, which I think might get a lot of attention going forward, was the Archbishop of Canterbury making a very pointed moment in his speech, I felt, to say those who serve will be forever remembered. Those who cling to power and privileges will long be forgotten.
Was that a dig, or was that...
There were certain people like the British former Prime Minister Boris Johnson sitting there listening to that, where you may think that the Archbishop was making a point, or maybe he was making a wider point to a lot of world leaders.
Or maybe to Meghan and Harry.
Maybe that actually, if you live your life to serve others, then you are remembered extremely well. If you lead your life clinging to power and privilege and forget about duty and service, then less so. And I think that was a very marked thing that he said, bordering on political, but I applaud him for saying it.
Or maybe he's
reminded people what the Queen stands for.
Maybe he's just being a bishop, a leader in the church, reminding all of us that we need to have lives of service and not to serve ourselves. Also on top, you can see there in front of the flowers, you have the imperial state crown, you have the orb, and you have the scepter, and they are resting on top of the coffin. They will be removed before the final hymn and placed on the altar. Then, obviously, I guess they were, and then now they're put back on the coffin, but they will not be buried. Inside the coffin, she is wearing her gold wedding band and her pearl earrings, and her engagement ring belonged to Philip's mother, which will likely be given, according to sources, to Princess Anne.